Hello, everyone. Good evening, good
Good
afternoon, good
evening.
morning, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to IPSI's weekly forum on Africa, Israel, and Black America. I'm your host, along with my lovely co-host, Joshua Washington and Olga Washington. We are happy to be here today.
Hey, I'm not sure you're looking at me, but yes, it's good to be with you tonight. I missed the last two episodes, sessions. I was traveling and being a mom.
Yes, and but we're happy to be here. So first of all, in our greetings, if this is your first time watching this, you can go to ibsi.org, look up all the stuff that we do, that we are involved with as the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, why we do what we do. You can check out our content. You can check out the events we have coming up, all that stuff. Also, you can subscribe or even just check out our Substack. If it's your first time and you want to see what we're all about, go to ibsi.substack.com, or you can scan the QR code that you see there, Africa Israel Weekly. You can see the articles we have. You can see the podcast episodes that we have. And if you really like our stuff, you can become a premium subscriber. I think most of our podcasts, some of our podcast episodes are free, but a lot of them are going to start being paid content. So if you want to get the paywall articles and the paid podcast episodes, then you have to be a paid subscriber. Also, if you want to just support IPSI, become a legacy builder. A legacy builder is someone who gives monthly to IPSI, usually a smaller amount. We've had people who've started off giving like $12 a month, $15 a month, and some of those people now give $50, $100 a month. It's something that really is extremely helpful to IPSI because it's the lifeblood. Those little donations every month make a huge difference, and it actually keeps things moving in a really smooth manner. So we really appreciate all of our legacy builders. And if you want to be one, go to ibsi.org/donate and do that now. We'll talk about that a little bit later on as people are coming in. What else do we have, Olga?
Just in relation to becoming a legacy builder, all donations to the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel are tax deductible. Like Joshua says, it goes a long way. It helps to keep the lights on. You'll see from the materials that you'll read about us, the work that we do on our website, YouTube, the podcasts, and also our Substack, that there's a lot of attention to detail, a lot of research that goes into what we do. We've got incredible staff, incredible volunteers. And so as a nonprofit, we really do appreciate the donations you make us possible, or rather you make it possible to do what we do. Also, another way of supporting us is by checking out our merch store on our website. Joshua's wearing this awesome t-shirt, Legacy Builder. I've seen him wear it before, but I said to him this evening when he put it on, I was like, you're looking nice over there. We've got water bottles, we've got mugs, we've got all sorts of great things that not only showcase IPSI, but also have phrases and quotes and statements by people that are deceased, but also that are still alive, that showcase the historic and incredible relationship between Africa and Israel, as well as the Black and American Jewish community.
Absolutely. So check out our merch store. Go to ibsi.org and check out all that stuff. Real quick, I just got back from the airport a couple hours ago. Our CEO and I were in Boston together, and then he just got back to Los Angeles. He was in Los Angeles, then he flew out to Boston for a very special event that we had, and then now he's back in Los Angeles with one of his good friends and our good friends as well, Dennis Prager, and he'll talk more about that when he comes back. But a lot of good stuff ahead. We had a great time in Boston. It was a birthday party for a very special woman by the name of Margot Einstein.
Can I say how old she was?
Yeah, of course.
Give me 101.
She turned 101.
Mazel tov.
Yes, so 101, and she is still quick and just like, I mean, her jokes were right on point. She was so she asked our CEO to give a speech at her birthday party. And she wanted him to go all out. She said, "Look, I want you to preach. I want you to do your thing." So our CEO was going in and talking about all this stuff. And then she needed something. And so she leaned over to me and asked me something. So I was answering her. And she was, at the same time that she was talking to me, I didn't realize she was still listening to every single word he said. And so something that our CEO said, she was talking to me and she went, boo, boo. And then she kept talking to me, and I went, I didn't even hear what he said. Whatever he said, it was something about Yasser Arafat, but the fact that she could hold a conversation and talk to me and still hear all the words he was, she's just quick. And she's one of the founders of Christians and Jews United for Israel. She is an activist. She has a long track record of being often the first voice out there to speak up. When Harvard was going crazy 20 years ago, she was out there by herself with picket signs in the cold, in the snow, protesting. What all this craziness we're seeing now, Margot saw even then, and she was speaking out then. So we were just appreciating her for not just being 101, but her lifelong legacy and all the people that she touched. So it was really great to be there in Boston. And then again, our CEO had to hop on a plane. We both got on a plane early the next morning. I came back to North Carolina. He went all the way over back to California to do some more work with Dennis Prager. So there's a lot of good stuff along the way. Go ahead, Olga.
On that note, we've showcased a little bit or spoken to some of what we do, and it's not only research and educational work, but we have a speakers bureau. I happen to be the chief of that. So if you have any events, if you have any birthday parties, as Joshua has just referred to, where you want information as well as speakers that are articulate, that have done their research, that are able to bring an incredible perspective on what's happening in the Middle East, specifically as it pertains to Israel and Africa, as well as what we see in America, and frankly other parts of the West, with regards to Black support for Israel and what's going on there, then do feel free to reach out to the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, and we would be very, very happy to come and be a part of your event. Let me say this as a last one: Josh is also an incredible musician. Over the years that we've been married, I have become one of his critics. I'm not his greatest critics. I think his greatest critics are our boys. But
Sure.
he is very talented and his music is fantastic. So also that's another offering that the Institute for Black Solidarity for Israel has.
Yes, and that's what I forgot. I did do music for that event as well. We did a few songs, and then we sang Happy Birthday, and then we did a couple of horas. People were just around the circle, and that was a ton of fun. So yes, absolutely. Please reach out to us. I just see a comment here, and I think it's funny, but someone asked if your earrings are Palestinian flag earrings. If you notice, there's a color in here that is not the Palestinian flag, which is yellow. Um, and I know this person who's commenting is not meaning this in a bad way, but I will take this opportunity to say that the Palestinian flag, much like the Palestinian identity, appropriates a lot of things. So if you look at it, I think it's the Jordanian flag. The Palestinian flag just removed the star, I think, from it. Like that's all it is. These colors are very African colors. Pan-African, red, black, and green are the Pan-African flag colors. Yellow is just a very bright color that's in a lot of different, even across the continent, different clothes. You definitely will see yellow in there. And yeah, the the inventors of the Arab Palestinian people just kind of took all those things. So, I mean, and I know you didn't, again, Allison, thank you for asking that question, but we got to take a little opportunity to educate. So no, it's not the Palestinian flag. These are just, I think I bought these earrings. I did. I bought her those earrings, actually.
You did a good job.
So yes, good question though. All right, so we're gonna hop into a couple of things. I want to take a moment to talk about Marvel. Okay, talk about Sabra. It's been kind of trending for a minute. Years ago, I think it was 2011, when I was really kind of still at the beginning of my Israel journey and I was researching a lot. I found out about a superhero named Sabra in the comic books. I read, I think her alter ego, or her mild mannered alter ego name, was Bat Seraph. I think it was, like, now that I think about it, what, like daughter of the angels or something, but I think that was her name. And she was an Israeli superhero who basically had super strength. She was kind of almost like a Captain America or a Black Panther, but in Israel, right? And her backstory was that she was part of the Mossad, which is like the top secret, agency in Israel, and all that stuff. And so I remember back into I could probably find the post. I made a post about it on Facebook saying Marvel needs to do this one day. And this was after, it was 2011 and 12. So I think we had already gotten a couple of Iron Man movies. Maybe it was 2012. So maybe it was after the first Avengers movie. And I was like, well, Marvel needs to do this. And so Marvel finally does it. They kind of do a premiere of it or something. But we found out that they kind of changed her backstory. So she's no longer a Mossad agent, and I think they even made it no longer that she's no longer an Israeli, that she's a Russian from the Black Widows. So she's connected to, you know, Scarlett Johansson's character, either Black Widow or just from the U.S. government. And so they kind of changed it in that way, right? Made her something different. And then I think after there's a lot of uproar, and then I saw a statement from Marvel saying that she still has Jewish heritage. So that's kind of where we're not quite sure how they're going to do this character now, because it's still in the early stages. They can change some stuff, but the actress herself is Israeli. So people are kind of raising eyebrows, like, well, why wouldn't you just make her Israeli like the actress? The comic book character is Israeli. Stan Lee was Jewish, and he also he was pro Israel. He even made statements when he was alive. He even had certain comic book stories that kind of touched on the conflict sometimes, which is interesting. But that's kind of where we are with it. What do you anything want to add, Olga?
Well, this isn't really my area of expertise. Fun fact, when I got married, I didn't even know which universe Spider-Man was in. So I've been learning a little bit.
You didn't know Spider-Man was a superhero. That's what you said.
I didn't.
You said Spider-Man is a superhero, right?
Yes. But anyway, I've been educated in all the years that we've been married. And what's been fascinating also in this education is the Jewish origins of the creators of Marvel. In fact, I was busy looking up, Joshua, as you were introducing this topic. 2 weeks ago, the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel premiered what is not only an informative video, but it's also quite fun, that is showcased by one of our IPSI Peace ambassadors, and it is called The Jewish Origins of Marvel's Black Panther. Anyway, so I say all of that to say that there is definitely rich Jewishness as well as Israeliness in the Marvel universe. I mean, my personal feelings about the uproar, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to anybody. Like, you can go and check out my allegiance and my loyalty and my commitment to this cause. Is I just think, Joshua, that sometimes we need to pick our battles. At the moment, it kind of feels as if, what's that game, whack-a-mole? It's like boom, 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 boom. There's just so many issues that are very, very problematic as it pertains to Israel, as it pertains to the Jewish people, as it pertains to anti-Semitism and Jew hatred. And one of the things that I've learned from you and the Washington family is that sometimes superheroes, as they appear on TV and movies, are going to look different and have a slightly different storyline as they would in the comic book. In fact, in many of the novels that we read and books that we read, people will often say, read the book first, because the movie is not going to be either anything like it, or it's going to have lots of changes. And so, yes, there was this uproar, and I'm kind of like, with everything else that's going on, really, is this where we want to be paying attention with regards to our activism and all of these various things? So to be honest, I'm a little bit ambivalent. Like, my focus is on some of these other issues that are really, really problematic, including the International Court of Justice. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. We've got the anti-Semitism in Paris, the Olympic Games, the safety of the Israeli athletes. We've got the big hoo-ha-ha of American politics that impacts Israel and what the relations with America and Israel may be. So for me, Joshua, that's where I'm focusing my attention and efforts, and movies on movies. Moving on.
And I just had a thought too, because I'm also, my feelings are ambivalent as well, a little bit torn in that I understand and the power of film in every age, and since film began, film has its place in society, right? There are moments where it was the I should have looked this up before, but the black lady who played Lieutenant Uhura in Star Wars, the original series, she almost quit the series, and the person who convinced her not to quit was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And he said, no, my kids love seeing you on screen. What you're doing is so important. You don't understand. You need to stay. And she stayed and had a long, illustrious career with did I say Star Wars? Star Trek. Did I say Star Trek? I meant, if I said Star Wars, I meant to say Star Trek. A long, illustrious career with Star Trek because of Dr. King. And because of her presence there, especially at that time, it was a big deal for now the later Star Trek series. You had different black actors. You had LeVar Burton from Reading Rainbow. You had Star Trek Voyager. You had different, but you had people almost like having permission to do movies or do shows like that. So I do understand the importance, but like Olga, like you were saying, for me, it would be more powerful, and this is what we're fighting for at IPSI is I think it'd be more powerful if allies could really make a fuss about this, right? How many people, rightly or wrongly, right? How many other people who weren't black would make a fuss if they changed Black Panther and made him, Russian? I think a lot of people, not just black people, a lot of people would be upset. And so it's something I think that needs to. It's not a fight that doesn't need to happen, but I think that for us as activists, there really are heavier things right now that are going on, and it's unfortunate because as a moviegoer and a movie lover, I would love to see this very Israeli character. Um, but yeah, and especially because they've changed ethnicities of other actresses and made them Muslim. They've made that right. So it's like, okay, but why can't she just stay who she is? And I get it. But with all that's going on, yeah, I fear that we play whack-a-mole quite a bit, and we're just tiring ourselves out, and letting some of the bigger issues kind of pass us by a little bit.
If I can just say one last thing on this so that nobody misunderstands it, we're not saying that small issues aren't important, not at all, because there's that saying that the devil is in the detail. What I'm observing, however, and Josh, I think you relate to this as well, is that sometimes our efforts are misplaced with regards to the principles that we should
Yep.
be arguing against and coming for. I mean, just even when one looks at language and how language is being used, right? The principle of consistency and the principle of truth. We have some within the Israel space that are very happy for lies to be told when it suits them for the misappropriation of terms. For example, we were challenging a couple of years ago this whole notion that there's even Palestinian apartheid. We're like, wait, you can't do that because people are saying that it's Israel apartheid week. So there are small things, yes, that have got massive impact because the principle fundamentally is wrong.
Yeah.
And so, yes, we will go after that, and we do go after that. As it pertains, however, to just the issues that are going on now, my humble opinion, this is kind of like the stove's on fire and the house is on fire, and people are rather paying attention to the stove that's on fire. It's like, no, let the stove burn because we need to sort out the house.
That's good. That's good. All right, y'all. So now we'll talk about that more as it develops, but let's get into it for a second. So first of all, you mentioned the Olympics, which I didn't even write in our notes, but we've just been following what's been going on and all of that stuff. But I first want to talk about Yemen, because as we're seeing more and more, as I think, I don't know if it's a Gen Z term, but Yemen has entered the chat room. Okay, and it's not pretty. And Israel is fighting a war on several fronts. I heard an IDF soldier the other day say like maybe 7 or more, right? So you have Hamas, you have Hezbollah, you have the Houthis in Yemen, you have other factions at different parts of the borders. And so what happened a couple days ago is that the Houthis in Yemen sent a drone that made it all the way to Tel Aviv, exploded, damaged a building, and killed one Israeli in Tel Aviv. Israel then responds by attacking a Houthi base on the port of Yemen. And part of how we know this is because there were Yemenis who actually took a video of it celebrating Israel destroying a Houthi base in Yemen. So you have Yemenis who don't like the Houthis, which I'll get back to in a second, and we can talk about too, because there's a thought I have about that as well. And then just yesterday, I believe, Yemen sends another missile, but Israel actually intercepts it. Now, the thing that we have to remember in this is that the backer of the Houthis in Yemen, guess it?
It's Iran.
It's Iran. Iran, who backs a lot of the terror on the African continent. So Iran, who's responsible for a lot of the slavery on the African continent. Iran, who Hamas has pledged allegiance to. The same, that Iran now is helping back Hamas, has been backing the Houthis and Hezbollah. Like, so this is Israel is essentially fighting a multiple proxy wars with Iran. Except for Israel, it's not a proxy war. For Israel, it's a war. Israel doesn't have any proxies, right? But Iran has many proxies. So this is what's going on right now. as we speak. Before I move on, what were we gonna add to that, Olga?
No, that this is real. And several years ago, when there was the debate about funding Iran, not funding Iran, and the previous administration pulled out of the Iran deal, and then the current administration put back. Iran has been given the means, has been given the funds in order to not only ensure that one proxy is attacking Israel, but that multiple proxies are attacking Israel, like Joshua said. And Joshua, Iran is funding much of the legal warfare that we're having, right? We've spoken about, and we're going to touch up now because there's been developments at the different UN bodies and these international bodies, which are now compromised. So it is. This is again speaks to the principle of it. People are like, oh no, it's not that bad. Later on, do they money? Okay, well, here we are. Here we are. Yep. It really is an existential threat. And our prayer continues to be that he who watches over Israel, who does not slumber or sleep, that his hand will continue to be over Israel. There were multiple drones that came from Yemen, and only one, thank God, in all things give thanks. Only one made it all the way to Tel Aviv, and unfortunately, it did hit. But yeah, just our prayers need to be with Israel, its leaders, the IDF. They're fatigued. They've been fighting in the south for months on end. It's over 9 months now. It's sadly quickly approaching the 10th month mark. So it's intense.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And one thing that I saw, and this really is what we've been talking about this more and more. That maybe about 4 or 5 weeks ago, we brought this up, but there's sentiment in Gaza, that there's sentiment amongst the Gazans that we hate Hamas, right? Which is okay, that's a step. But as we're looking into more and more, well, it's not really enough, right? It's not enough to just hate Hamas, because some of those people just want another regime that's going to destroy Israel. They're not really concerned about justice or real freedom. They're upset that Hamas is oppressing them. They want someone who will attack Israel without oppressing them, right? That's, and then you have some who actually want peace with Israel. They tend to not speak up as loudly because they know that they'll be offed immediately. They'll be accused of collaborating with Israel. I mean, just having a FaceTime meeting with an Israeli, they can be accused of collaborating with the Mossad and like publicly tortured and executed. So now, that being said, though, there still has to be this push, right? Let's look at our Iranian brothers and sisters, are in LA, in DC, in Paris. The people of Iran who live in different parts of the world, they don't just stand against the Ayatollahs. Okay, that's the one. That's okay. That's great. They also declare their solidarity with Israel and the Jewish people. They buffet and stand against Jew hatred. Their whole thing is, we stand with you and we want peace in the region. We want the regime, the Islamic Republic of Iran, to fall, and we want peace and prosperity to flourish. We want Israel to live in peace. Israel high. That's different than I hate the Ayatollah. That doesn't really mean much. You could hate the Ayatollah because he's oppressive towards women. Well, I'm a woman and I hate Ayatollah. Okay, well, that's great. How do you feel about the Jews? Oh, well, screw the Jews. Like, okay, we'll see how that doesn't really help anything. So the people of Yemen, when I saw that video, it was just a selfie video of after the explosion, and they were just like, yeah, it's okay, that's great, but how do you actually feel about Israel itself? Are you happy because you want peace with Israel, or are you just happy because you hate the Houthis? And that has to be something for the people on the ground. There has to be this unifying spirit of, we're moving in this direction. That's how you can dismantle an oppressive regime. So yes, someone said the Ayatollah is not only oppressive towards women. Yes, I know, it's called an example. I'm just giving one example. Ayatollah is oppressive towards lots of people. They hang gays from public squares in cranes. They're oppressing Christians as we speak. Yes, I mean, the reason why Jews don't live there anymore was because of the oppression that happened when they switched from the Shah to the Ayatollahs. But anyway, so those are my thoughts, and especially in terms of what's going on in Yemen. The Abraham Accords really, I think, highlighted that for countries around the world who actually wants peace. And it turned out it's a lot more people than I guess some of the experts were saying that there was, right? There are a lot of Arab countries, both governmental and on the ground, who actually were interested in trade with Israel, cultural exchanges with Israel, business exchanges, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, go ahead, Olga.
No, just on your point around the Abraham Accords, as well as people wanting something better for themselves. It takes a special kind of evil to want to continue to live underneath an oppressive state, to want to be a leader that only oppresses your people. And so, what we saw with the Abraham Accords, and which can frankly continue to be, unfortunately, it hasn't had the political backing from various countries in the West, particularly the United States of America, as it could have, is these countries saying we want better for ourselves. We recognize that not only is Iran, not only are the Houthis and all these various other proxies a problem as it pertains to us as a people. Like, we want a better life. And because we want a better life, we're going to reject them and also stand with Israel, because we recognize that we are being used as pawns, we are being used as puppets in this bigger game. One last thing, and I'm in the process of listening to her podcast in this regard. Inat Wolf has an incredible line of reasoning, which I haven't heard from many, and that is that we need to start giving the people who live under oppressive regimes, more specifically in Gaza, who live under Hamas, we need to start giving them agency and responsibility for their own actions. Yep. To your point, yes, you can't say, okay, we condemn what happened on October 7. Okay, what are you doing about it? And we're not trying to desensitize the really disastrous consequences that many of these people are likely to attract. I mean, just even getting food, right? Reaching out for humanitarian food has unfortunately not only drawn the ire of Hamas, but it's drawn death by gunfire, right? So we recognize that, and it is our hope and our prayer that there will come a movement. History showcases it time and time again, a movement where people start to say enough is enough. Not only do we hate our regime, our leaders, for for who they are, but also for what they are doing, because when there is peace with Israel, then there really will, be peace for the people themselves.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's absolutely true. And it just goes to further show how these things are connected. So we were in Boston, like I said, and it was for a birthday party. One of the people that we got to meet up with, who we saw at the party, was our good friend Charles Jacobs, who is a modern day abolitionist. He's one of the founders of the African Jewish Alliance. He's one of the founders of I Abolish, one of the founders of the American anti-slavery movement. He's one of the founders of Camera. Actually. Like he's
done a lot.
This guy has been this is he told lots of stories. He used to be a full-on communist, and he was just telling a story about how, and no matter what his ideology was, the common thread that I saw, even in how he pursued the girl of his dreams who wound up becoming his wife, was he went after it. Like, so when he was a communist, he was sincere in his beliefs, and he would lead protests, he would lead marches. He led a protest in front of an apartment complex that he now owns, right? Like later on. So it's like now his ideologies flips, and it's different it's evolved and matured over the years, but he's the same fiery person. And I bring that up to say that he was sharing with me and my father something out of the Jewish prayer book, something that's prayed, 3 times a day in different types of wording, but it's the same. And I can't remember exactly in Hebrew, but in English it's blessed are you, O Lord, King of the universe, who frees the captives. And he said every day, 3 times a day, we pray. I don't know why I'm getting chills, but we actually pray to God 3 times a day. You are the God who breaks the chains of the captive. You're the one who releases the bonds. And when we're looking at what's going on in the Middle East, we have to understand that, yes, we say Middle East and Africa, but they're one and the same in terms of what's going on, what Iran is funding in against Israel. It's funding against Africa as well. What Iran is funding against the Saturday people, they're also funding against the Sunday people in slavery, in terrorism, slaughtering, and then funding those who wish to cause harm and take over Africa. It's all an attempt to continue to colonize Africa, right? Once upon a time, Arabia was in one part of the world, and now you see the Arab world across North Africa. That's called imperialism, ladies and gentlemen. That's not. It didn't just grow like plants. It grew like a cancer and spread across Northern Africa. So This is a fight that is not just Israel's fight, but it's Africa's fight, and that's why the African Jewish Alliance exists. And that prayer was just very powerful. So it's something that I want to myself even pray, because it's something that we do. I mean, even in the Christian part of the Bible, in Hebrews 13:3, it says that we should pray for those who are in chains as if we were bound with them. So pretty sure that the people in chains would pray multiple times a day that God would release them, right? So we should be doing that as well. Yeah, Elizabeth, our IPSI ambassador, said the Shema facing Jerusalem. Absolutely. Shema Israel Adonai Eloheinu. So this prayer is it's a very holy prayer. And a part of that prayer is releasing of the captives, which is literally the opposite of radical Islam, which is subjugate those who don't follow Allah, and not even those who don't follow Allah, because one of the victims of slavery, people group, I should say, are Muslims as well. In Mauritania, most of the slaves are Black Muslim women. So it's not even just subjugate those who don't believe in Allah. It's just those who aren't. So they're not Arab, they're not men, right? Or they're men, but they're not Arab. Whatever it is, they don't belong. They're not as good as you. So,
or they don't believe the exact same way.
Or exactly, or they don't believe in the exact same way, and so they're underneath your foot. And so that's what we're facing, both in the African world, in the Jewish world, in the Christian world, and it's a fight that has to be fought with focus.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to take just a quick break. We normally have a little tidbit to show you, but we don't have that today. But I do want to say this. I want to reiterate for those who are watching. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. I'm Joshua Washington. This is my lovely co-host, Olga Washington. And we want to encourage you to become a legacy builder. So if you're watching this for the first time, or you're watching this for the 20th time and you still haven't done this, go to ibsi.org/donate and just set up. You can do like $10 a month. Start off something small. I'm telling you, those, we have a few bigger donors, and we're very, very grateful for them. What keeps us moving day to day are the monthly donations from the smaller amounts. You guys, they're huge. And so if you could just take a moment, you see it on your screen right now, go to ibsi.org/donate and become a legacy builder. The demand for IPSI continues to grow exponentially every few months. We're at a point now where we're spread pretty thin, and we kind of reached the limit of what we can do with the small amount, right? And so we can do so much more efficiently, and with much more, I think, with this much more of a swiftness and with excellence, with your help. So you have an amazing opportunity right now to help fund the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. Please do that now. We would greatly, greatly appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
All right, Olga, why don't you take it from here? Let's talk about the International Court of Justice. What's going on?
The International Court of Justice, my good gracious, which really has become an arm for political warfare against Israel and by implication, the Jewish people. So, by way of a recap, is last week, Friday, there was an opinion that was issued by the court, which has people up in arms. I saw a ridiculous post by Amanda Seales, who, for whatever reason, deems herself to now be an expert on all things Palestine and Israel. So, let me set the context a little bit. This particular opinion is exactly that. It's an opinion. It's distinct and different to the judgments that were given earlier in the year with regards to the case that South Africa brought against Israel at the International Court of Justice pertaining to the war that's currently raging between Gaza and Israel. This is very different. This is as a result of a resolution that the General Assembly of the United Nations passed in December of 2022 saying, please give us an opinion, International Court of Justice, as to the impact of Israel's continued occupation of the occupied territories, namely in Judea and Samaria, another word being Gaza, as well as with the West Bank.
Yeah.
Judea and Samaria. Well, I mean, because that's the real name, right?
Yeah.
So Judea and Samaria, also known as the West Bank, and then Gaza. And if people are wondering why we are specifically referring to that, we're happy to address it in another forum. So, number one, this is not a binding judgment in any regard. People are now going, oh, this is international law. Israel better listen. She's now found guilty of committing war crimes. Absolute garbage nonsense. This literally was the General Assembly saying, hey, tell us what your thoughts are.
Mhm.
All right. And that's exactly what happened. So we then have the court, which comprises 15 judges, who 14 of them then assent to the majority ruling. And then there's one dissenting opinion that is given by a judge who we need to thank God for, who I, as an African, particularly an African woman, want to say, thank you, Lord, for this example. And that is Judge Julia Sebutidi. She comes from Uganda. She was born in Uganda in the 1950s. And she was first appointed, and let me consult my notes because I wanted to read about her. She was first appointed to the court in 2012 and then again in 2021. And she was elected or rather appointed to the position of vice president in February of this year. Mm. She has consistently applied principle as it pertains to the application of not only international law, but also the function of the court. Because the very same way that we in many other examples say that Israel is a canary in a coal mine, that how Israel is treated, how the Jews are treated is an example of exactly how society is going to be treated, the exact same thing here. If the International Court of Justice is allowed, if organizations, if world bodies, if governments continue to allow and use the International Court of Justice as a means of political warfare against Israel, then the mechanics that uphold the International Court of Justice are going to fall apart. And then when people really do need some sort of assistance, when there are real genocides that are happening, when there are real issues facing particular people that need to be addressed, where's the principle going to be in order for those people's plights to be addressed? Like it's going to be gone. And this is unfortunately what we're starting to see at the International Court of Justice. Just very, very quickly before I speak to the specifics of this ruling, for those that have not really been paying attention, I encourage you to go and research the dissenting opinion that Judge Julia gave in January 2024, where the court was looking at, as a result of the case brought against Israel by South Africa, that is there genocide that's happening, right? And one of the statements that she said in her opening, if I may read, is that she said, in my respectful dissenting opinion, the dispute between the State of Israel and the people of Palestine is essentially and historically a political one, calling for diplomatic and negotiated settlement, blah, 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 blah. And she basically says that it is not a legal dispute susceptible by judicial settlement by the court. So she's saying, don't come here and use the court as a means of settling something that should be done in politics. Right, just don't do that. Again, she shows a similar vein in her arguing against the majority opinion in the decision that was given by her in May. And so there's just this consistency. In this particular opinion, she highlights, and we're not going to go into it now, but there is a rule of law that is important for us to note. And she highlights the uti possidetis juris principle. What does that mean? In summary, in layman's terms, it means that when there were countries that were coming out of colonialization, as they were in the early 1900s and even late 1800s, it was generally accepted at the time, and it became then international customary law, that the borders that those countries had, those emerging states, those emerging countries had in their colonial state, those were going to be the borders then that were going to be kept unless otherwise agreed as that country, as those states emerged as independent entities. And so this particular rule also was applied in 1948 when Israel declared independence after the Independence War or during the Independence War. And so now what we're seeing is that this court is challenging this principle and pretty much saying that this principle doesn't apply, because they're now saying, oh, I mean, there's so many aspects to it, so I'm just going to touch on it. But the court is saying, okay, Gaza and Judea and Samaria are occupied by Israel. Couple of issues there immediately that are wrong. First of all, there's no occupation in Gaza. For those of us that know our history, in 2005, Israel withdrew everything, even its graves, even its dead people, the bodies, right? The bones, it withdrew in totality. And so even this de facto control that people are now trying to argue about because of the restrictions of movements in and out, which is purely because of this genocidal intent that Hamas has in relation to Israel, There is no control there. And then when you look at Judea and Samaria, they're saying, oh, no, no, no. As a result of the 1967 war, when Israel recaptured this land, and then we had the Oslo Accords, and I'm skipping through various parts of history, there is no occupation. It's like, first of all, that land that was there was taken back by a sovereign entity because it was previously theirs. And it was as a result of a defensive war. And so even if you look at the laws of international wars, it legally obtained that land back. Josh, you and I spent a lot of time with Club Z, and one of the things that we would teach our young people is, why is there only this outcry with regards to the 1967 borders, as if nobody cares that before 1967, who occupied Judea and Samaria? Who occupied the West Bank?
Mm-hmm. It was Jordan.
It was Jordan. Oh, but we don't need to talk about Jordan.
Yep.
There was never an issue there. Who occupied the area of Gaza? It was Egypt. But only when Israel then gets back its land, which it has had, not only in terms of UN resolutions from 1948 and after, but let's go back thousands of years where in terms of sovereignty, that land belongs to Israel. So there is a legal claim that Israel has in addition to a moral claim and all of these other things. But now, if one just then looks at the particular principle of this, the mandate, right? The mandate for Palestine, the borders, if you look at where Israel was and what was supposed to be it, because remember in 1947, the UN brought this resolution saying, okay, let the Arabs live here and Israel live here. It was Israel that put up his hand and said, yes, we'll do it. And the Arabs said no. So that resolution fell. It didn't even pass. So they're now even challenging that to say, oh, you know what? Forget about the borders that Israel had pre that time. Forget about also history between 1948 and 1967. That land now needs to go back to the Palestinian people. But then there's also a couple of other issues because this particular opinion not only misstates the law, not only misstates the facts. And it's interesting that when you read Julia's opinion versus the other opinions, one of the things that the main opinion says is that there was no facts that were brought to it, pretty much. And again, I'm paraphrasing because it's so detailed, that there were no facts that were brought to it to showcase Israel's stance and position on the matter. But then in Julia's opinion, she's like, oh, no, we did receive facts. So it's like, okay, but now you're also blatantly lying. You are blatantly lying. And so it's problematic. It's problematic on many levels. This opinion that was issued, but thank God, really, in the most strongest terms, that we have Julia from Uganda, an African who pretty much is standing in the gap. She's standing in the gap as it pertains not only to the truth regarding Israel, because this is just legit warfare, as I mentioned, that they want Israel to be seen to be illegitimate. I remember the point that I was going to say is that it also negates the fact that in various reiterations of peace agreements and other resolutions, including the Jordan peace agreement, including the Oslo Accords, that reference the fact that this particular area excuse me, belong to Israel as a result of this uti possederis principle. Like, it just negates that. So it's like disappearing act, like, like a musician with a wand. Oh, we don't care about history. We don't care about facts. We don't care about all these agreements that are real and that are alive as a result of this, because we need to find Israel guilty. And it's bizarre, and it's wrong, and it's very problematic.
Yeah. And pray for protection too, because and for many reasons, not just even Israel, but Africans who go against the status quo of whatever the government's saying or whatever, it's not safe for them. African businessmen and women, African politicians, judges, whoever it is, they stand up and say, you know what? I'm tired of how things are. This is not the voice of the African people. Sometimes it's character assassinations. Sometimes it's actual assassinations.
Her country, on the points of character assassination, there was a statement that was released in January saying, no, she doesn't represent us.
Yep.
She doesn't represent our position. This is the first African woman to sit on the International Court of Justice. Up until the time where she was willing to stand boldly and even on her own, despite all of the attacks, to defend the integrity of the law, she was regarded and hailed as a trailblazer and as a very, very important jurist as it pertains to issues of international law, as it pertains to issues of human rights and all of these other things. Oh, but my goodness, you dare take a stand on truth as it pertains to Israel? Now you're going to be shot down in the figurative sense of the word, and God forbid the literal sense of the word.
That's a lesson actually too. Let's just side note for a second about character and what it really means to speak truth, right? I'm not talking about being an influencer, or being or whatever it is. I'm talking about speaking truth, period. And what I mean by that is sometimes the truth you speak is convenient for everyone, so they'll love you. And you are their savior. They will sing praises to your name. Like,
Applaud you.
oh my
Yep.
gosh,
Yep.
up and down everywhere. The moment you do the same exact thing, but in a way that's inconvenient for them, a lot of those people will turn on you. It's human nature. It's human nature. We all have done it to people and it's been done to us. Okay. And what we have to remember as people of truth is that we don't do it. Our motivation is not for the love of the people.
Absolutely.
It cannot be, because if that's your motivation, you will eventually start lying because you'll want the affirmation of the people. You can't. We even talked about this in the pro-Israel space, where there will be young people, young African people, who they'll say a couple of really great things about Israel. And then now they're paraded everywhere, right? They're everywhere. They're being paraded. But the moment that they say something that might challenge, it's okay. Now you have to sit down and be quiet. We can't talk to you anymore. It's okay. But what about, how about what's the what about teaching them? What about, we see it in sometimes even in the church culture. There's just because this young person shows a lot of promise, they're given everything and and then when they start to get full of themselves, and we throw them away, right? But see, the thing is, our anchor has to be truth, so that when we say something and it resonates and everyone loves us, we can stay centered and say, okay, well,
Correct.
all glory to God,
Yep.
moving forward.
Yep.
Not, oh my gosh, and let me stay up late and look at all the comments and look at all the messages that I got and post some of them and talk about how humble I am and all that stuff. Because the moment you have to say a truth they don't like, guess what? You're going to quit, because they are going to eviscerate you. You're going to cry, you're going to quit. Well, then if you're crying and quitting, that means that your reason for speaking the truth was not for the sake of truth.
Now, I just wanted to say, or you might not even speak the truth because you want the continued applause and you want the many likes and you want the affirmation and the public adulation. And so speaking truth is then something that you're like, you know what, I'm going to compromise. And once you start compromising once, well, then it's just a slippery slope from there. And so really, Josh, I love everything that you've just said. We have to be anchored in truth. And oftentimes that anchoring process takes time because it goes hand in hand with the development of character. You can't be in this to just do it for the feels and for the fame and this and the other. Speak truth when you are applauded by thousands, and speak truth just like Justice Julia, when you are by yourself at the highest courts in terms of international bodies and people are coming for you and they are calling you all sorts of names, but truth remains truth and is consistent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I want to just pause for a moment from this and pivot just for a second, because I do want to, just as on behalf of IPSI, both of us want to express our deep concerns for, and obviously our solidarity with our Israeli brothers and sisters who are in the Olympics right now. Because you guys, we use the term death threats a lot for different things, but you have to understand how, I mean, for those, some of you have experienced it before, how incredibly frightening it is to receive death threats, to get a letter in your mailbox from someone that you didn't know had your address, right? To have pictures texted to you of your kids going to school, saying, we know where your kids go to school. Like, it's not just, which is still bad enough, but it's not just someone in your DM saying something bad, that can be terrible too. But it's like these athletes are getting messages sent to them saying, if you come to, and we're not talking about Syria, okay? We're not talking about Lebanon. We're not talking about Iran. We're talking about Paris, France. In Paris, France, Israeli athletes are being told, if you come here, we will kill you, by Islamists in France, ladies and gentlemen, in France. So that goes, first of all, that goes to show how far the West has fallen, because we're not even talking about anywhere else. We're talking, the Abraham Accords show that there are actually a lot of people in the Arab world who want to do business with Israel. What it also did over here, it revealed more how this is actually turning into that, and they're turning into what we used to be. So yes, it wasn't, the Olympics aren't being held in Iraq. They're being held in Paris, France, and Israelis are concerned for their life and their safety, just being athletes in Paris because of all these death threats they're getting from these Jew hating Islamists in Paris, France. Go ahead, Olga.
No, it just makes me think about Idan with Eurovision, right? So here you have this young lady, all she wants to do is sing and showcase her gift, represent her country, but she now has to do this underneath a cloud of security. I can't even imagine the angst and the fear and just like having to keep looking over one's back. And to your point, now you have these athletes who have trained for years upon years upon years. The Olympic Games are regarded as the like pretty much the ultimate games for any sport other than soccer because that's the World Cup, football. And so here you are, you've trained all this time. It's a dream come true. And my heart goes out to the fact that how many of them are actually just then going to be able to perform and just be there and do their thing without having to worry, looking over their shoulder every single time they receive a message or a piece of mail. Like, is this going to be an invitation to my own funeral, which some of these athletes have been getting? So it's appalling. It is wicked. It is awful. We're praying for them. Our hearts go out to them. At any point in time that we can show them love, anybody, even if you don't regard yourself as a Zionist, even if you don't care for Israel or you don't care for the Jewish people, just on a basic human level, right? Just on a basic human level, think about them, pray for them. Again, we can't keep ringing it enough that what happens with the Jews is just an example, a prelude to what is going to happen with the Christians and other people in the West. They have made it very clear in Paris and in other places in the West. I mean, Michigan, my gosh, we haven't even got it for today. Michigan, United States, the march that happened last week with ISIS.
Dearborn, yeah.
Like they are loud and proud about their intentions with the West. So yeah, that's my contribution to the Israeli athletes.
Yeah, it never stays isolated.
Mhm.
It's just a fact. It never stays isolated. When our CEO gave his speech the other day in Boston, he used the example of the raid on Entebbe. The Israeli hostages who were trapped in Uganda, and the operation that was done to under the radar to rescue them. And the only IDF casualty or life that was lost was Yonatan Netanyahu, Bibi Netanyahu's brother, and which that's a whole other thing in itself. But one of the things that I didn't know that our CEO talked about was that, well, this part I did know. Kenya allowed Israel to refuel in the country because they just wasn't enough fuel to take a plane from Israel to Uganda and back with all the stuff that was in it. They had cars in it, they had all kinds of cargo, so they had to refuel. So Kenya said you can refuel here, and so that was an example of Kenya as a country, as Africa standing up and saying, no, we will help you. Once Idi Amin knew what was going on, and afterwards when he found out that Kenya helped Israel, he had the Kenyans who are living in Uganda slaughtered. Now, these are Kenyan people. It's not the Kenyan government, just people who belong to the country of Kenya who are living, maybe visiting Uganda, had them slaughtered. And our CEO was using that as an example to say, like Rabbi Jonathan Sachs said of blessed memory, what happens to the Jewish people never stays with the Jewish people. So Idi Amin his hatred was to Israel because for different reasons, but the main one was that Israel, there was relations there, but he wanted weapons from Israel so that he can just run roughshod and commit genocide. And Israel said, yeah, we're not going to do that. And so he got mad, and then he started cursing Israel and all that stuff. So his hatred toward Israel spilled over into hatred for Africans, fellow Africans, slaughtering Kenyans and slaughtering Ugandans, by the way, during his reign, right? Because hatred is a cancer that spreads all over the place. And we have to understand that when we see people do things like Eden, like when they block her from singing, that's it's just pure hatred. Because if that's our standard, even if everything you say about Israel is true, which we know it isn't, why don't you do that kind of protesting when a Palestinian is singing? Gaza oppresses Black Palestinians in Gaza. Did you know that? I know, right? Did you know there are Afro-Palestinians in Gaza that are oppressed? Did you know that they still call them slave as a nickname? Do you know they drag people in the streets who just say they don't agree with Hamas? Do you know why don't you do that why didn't you do that when a representative from Iran came to New York just a few months ago, right? Why didn't you do that when 11 the person who heads the International Court of Justice is from Lebanon?
Mhm. Yeah.
If you really were about justice,
Yeah.
and like I said, let's just say what you're saying about Israel is true, which we know it isn't, you should be angry all the time about every single country in the world. But no, you want to rally around and make feel unsafe an Israeli because she's a Jew who represents her country in Israel. That's a cancer that will spread, and the more that we as non-Jews across the world sit back because it's too political and it's I don't want to da, 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 it will come to our front door. It always will.
It's already here.
It's already here. Last thing I'll say is we learned from the sages, from the Jewish sages, that when Moses was born, that the magicians came to Pharaoh and said, "We see in the stars that the Savior of the Hebrew is born, but we don't know if he's Hebrew or Egyptian." And that was why Pharaoh said, "Have all the." If you look at the scriptures, he didn't say, "Have all the baby Hebrew boys killed." That was what he first said to Shifra and Pua. But his edict after that was all the baby boys, every one of them. If a boy is born, I don't care if they're Hebrew or Egyptian, slaughtered, throw them into the Nile. So if you were an Egyptian who sat back because it was just the Hebrews at first, well, guess what? Now Pharaoh's coming for your son. It never just ends with the Jews, ladies and gentlemen. Hatred is a cancer, and we have to shed our fear. We have to shed our fear of looking like any kind of way. If we see something we know is wrong, we have to speak up against it. Period. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Maybe I'm going to use that point to
Go ahead.
segue into going back to the principle of truth
Mhm.
as we wrap up. And so, without going into the politics of the Republican nominee for president and the Democratic Party nominee for president, Amber Rose spoke at the Republican National Convention. And yes, there's a big hoo ha ha as to why was she there. Blah, blah, blah. Frankly, I don't care. What I care about at this point in time is the content of what she said. And she articulated something that we have consistently said, something that I have always said. Again, I go back to the time when I had the privilege of teaching young people at Club Z, would say to them to say, yes, I've done my research. Yes, I've done my homework, but do not accept what I am saying as gospel truth. Go and do your research yourself. So Amber articulates the fact that based on the choice of media that she was consuming, she had a particular thought process around who the Republican Party was and the presidential nominee. And her dad challenged her. All he said was like, okay, go do your own research. So what he was saying is that don't rely on what people are saying. Come to your own conclusion. And if you're going to stay with where you are, fine. But if you're then going to move, then have the courage then to move based on the information that you find. And so she then went out and she articulates this in her speech. And she said, I went and I did my own research. And guess what? She came to a different conclusion. Joshua, I have seen with my own eyes young Black kids who were pro BDS because they consumed a particular narrative coming out of a particular portion of the media. The media is largely to blame.
Yep.
But when they were challenged to do their own research, to do their own thinking, to do their own investigation, they then came out with a different picture as to who Israel was because the facts were deliberately been hidden. The truth was deliberately being hidden from them. So again, if we are about truth, we will consistently, even us, consistently look for what is the truth. There's a lot of opaqueness. There's a lot of narratives that are being crafted. Both, unfortunately, it's creeping in also on the pro side because everything needs to be hunky dory, which it isn't always. Even various aspects of what we're supposed to accept as being just true. It's like it's even a biblical principle. We've spoken one to the fact of in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, a thing shall be established. Find resources, more than one, not just Wikipedia, not just Google, not just mainstream media, more than one resource that will then affirm and confirm what is truth. Again, there are people out there. Maybe it's a good thing that we're only raising her name now. Maybe we'll talk about her next week if it's relevant. I mean, Candace Owens went on another anti-Semitic rant, and she was like, "Oh, in the interest of really being true to facts and da 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 da." Meanwhile, half of what she was spewing out was lies. It was absolute lies. And so just because somebody says, I'm telling you the truth, and they sound intelligent, all right, or they showcase pictures that seem to be important, doesn't mean that that's the truth. Go and research. and find the information for yourself. And if you have any questions, not only is Joshua here, not only am I here, our staff at the Institute for Black Solidarity is here. We would be more than happy to give you our insights in terms of what needs to be, because we have to be committed in the good times and the bad times to truth about who Israel is, truth about the Jewish people, because as has already been articulated by Joshua this evening, it will ultimately come back to us. It's not only the right thing to do, but it's the important thing to do.
Amen. Absolutely. That is right on point. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. And we're living in very unprecedented times, and we're here every week. We're going to discuss these things. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've appreciated what you've heard this past hour, again, I'll say this at the end, consider becoming a legacy builder with IPSI. Set up a monthly amount. It can be a small amount, but it really helps us do the work that we do. We greatly appreciate it. Go to ibsi.org/donate and help us to do this work we're doing. If you want us to come to your area, go to our website and fill out a form, and we can do an event where you are. We can do all kinds of stuff, and we have IPSI ambassadors all around the country. So we also have people who can help you, who might be closer to you as well. But we appreciate the work that we get the privilege of doing, and we appreciate being able to connect with you. So we hope you've enjoyed this tonight.
Have a good evening.
Yes, you guys, thank you so much. Have a good rest of your week. We'll be back next week, same time, same place. Don't miss us. See you soon.